Doc, I'll tell you what my private KPI is. I said, what is it? I get fewer phone calls after midnight.
Yeah.
That's what I want. Yeah.
I'm
or on the
sleeping better.
weekends, right?
I'm sleeping better.
I'm sleeping better. Hi, I'm Ed Bellina.
Hello, guys. Alvaro Cuba here.
And we're here to welcome you to another podcast of Manufacturing Meetup. This is a show where we kick back, we talk about what really happens on the shop floor, and, we get to learn from you, you get to learn from us, and it's a lot of fun. So welcome to MMU.
Yes. What's about your hat?
Oh, the hat. So some of you may know that we're moving into a new building, new to us anyway, and I wanted to put up a flagpole with the American flag. So I found a company that makes the flags in America. They're made in the United States. They're
nice.
Beautiful, heavy cloth, embroidered. They're not inexpensive, but they are worth every penny. And I got the hat for free, so I figured, hey, show my colors, because 250 is coming up, baby. 250-year anniversary of this country. God bless.
That's true. And look
How about
at mine.
You, my amigo? You're ready for something.
This is my trekking and hiking. I used this when I was in the Camino de Santiago, and I'm planning a second one, so I'm ready to go.
Very jealous. It's in my bucket list, and I haven't set one foot on a Camino yet.
I'll take you, amigo. I'll take you.
We'll have to go. Yeah, I got a built-in guide here.
Sure.
So today we're excited to bring you an episode with Doc Palmer. Okay, he is the author of the planning book, and you can see where you can get it later. McGraw-Hill bestseller. He's on his 4th edition, and to talk to him, it is literally going through the Bible of planning. So much experience. He can quote what works and what doesn't work off the top of his head, and he's done it in a bunch of countries. He's focused on practical applications. That's one thing I really liked about it. He talks about the theory, but he dives into practice. And it may be a little bit longer than our previous podcast, but please hang, because the time is well worth it.
Yes. And you guys, and a lot of plant managers talk about how busy they are on firefighting to plan. Doc brings fresh perspective, saying you need to plan to break the firefighting
cycle.
And he's going to tell us how to do that. And he has, as Ed was saying, great examples. But at first, hit the subscribe button, and so you don't miss, yes, down there, don't miss the conversation. So, and with that, let's get started. So welcome, Doc. Great having you in the show.
Thank you.
We usually break this up into a couple of segments. And in the first segment, with your experience, we'd like to get a sense for what is the real cost of not planning, right? I mean, you've got a plant that's struggling, they're firefighting perhaps. What does it actually cost for them to stay reactive?
Well, I've got an actual dollar figure I'll share with you, but the problem is things break. And when things break, we're not making product. And maintenance is maintaining. It's not fixing things when they break really fast. It's keeping them from breaking. But our problem is things do break, and we've staffed ourselves to the point where we just keep up with the breakdowns. When things are not breaking, management says, well, we have 10 electricians. 2 of them are about to retire. Maybe we can get by with 8 electricians. You never know until you try. And then, so our staffing slowly goes down as things are not breaking. But then you get to the point where you're not keeping up, and we start fixing things. And the degree that operators yell, management suddenly says, well, operators are yelling quite a bit. Now, they don't say it that way, but they say, maybe we should hire a few more electricians. And we staff right at the point where when things are not breaking, we don't replace staff from attrition. And when things are breaking like crazy, then we replace people just to the point where we can keep up and the operators don't scream at us too loud. But we're doing a lot of reactive maintenance. And the maintenance manager's question is, how can we do more proactive maintenance to keep things from breaking when we have our hands full of reactive maintenance? Because you have to fix the things when they break. You have to get the horse back in the barn. How do you find the time to find the rotten boards in the barn? How do you find the time to fix the gate? How do you find the time to fix the lock before it's too late? Well, when they do these industry wrench time studies, they find around the world and across industries, we're only typically at about 35% wrench time, where we're actually moving a job ahead, say turning a wrench. The other time we're working, we're getting parts, we're walking to the job, we're getting tools, we're getting instructions, we're going to give people a break. But the time we're actually at a job working on the equipment, it's only 35%. Well, the planning and scheduling
is not 35%.
The planning and scheduling kicks you up to 55%, which doesn't sound like a lot. It means to get ahead, you need to work half days. But the 55 divided by 35 is 1.57. So just say you get a 50% pump. So if you're completing only 100 work orders a month, that translates, you could be completing 150 work orders a month. And by definition, the extra work is proactive, the extra 50 work, because you've got the reactive work orders covered. So the dollars for that are, let's say you had 100 employees.
Big.
Let's say you had 100 maintenance people.
Should we drum some drums?
Yeah. And you got a 50% pop. Okay.
Yeah.
And say 2,000 hours a year. That's 100,000 hours extra a year.
That's incredible.
Okay. Now times $50 an hour for a mechanic. That's $5 million a year. But this extra labor you're paying you're getting for free worth $5 million a year in salaries. The industry rule of doing proactive maintenance, every extra $1 you spend on proactive maintenance saves you $10 on your bottom line, because you're keeping things from breaking, which helps you make a product. So the $5 million a year times 10, that's $50 million a year. If you had 100 maintenance people, that's what you're losing. You're a profitable company at 35% wrench time. You could make an extra.
Think what you could do.
Yeah. Hey, say you only have get half of that pop. Well, that's $25 million a year.
Any plant manager will kill for that.
Actually, you're saving $500,000 per year per maintenance employee, doing the planning and scheduling. That's like pie in the sky.
And for a small investment in planners, for example,
three
planners are worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
And then maybe you add some parts people to it, and now that wrench time really starts going up.
Yeah.
And it adds up very quickly. No, Doc, figures are production and people, but then every time you are reactive, imagine quality problems, safety problems, production, service problems. No, and that's not even in those numbers. So imagine, guys, I hope you are now really interested.
Well,
in the
big idea.
When you get the pop-in work order completion rate, you run into a new problem.
Yeah,
you run out of work orders. So,
good problem to have.
Then the operators can tell you about little things. You can do all the little things you should be doing anyway.
And not only that on the numbers, but also on the relationships.
Yeah,
Doc, what happens when you are in the reactive mode? You mentioned operators start complaining, but then starts the fight with maintenance and finger pointing and all that. So tell us a little bit more about that, how that impacts the entire plant.
Well, operators, they appreciate us coming out there in the middle of the night and fixing something. deep in their hearts, they know that's not right. That they would rather they don't ever have to call the maintenance department.
Right.
Yeah.
And then management has to keep maintenance people doing the little things so operations never has problems. I mean, we get an award for firefighting. We don't get an award for nothing breaks.
Prevent.
That's the problem.
That's what you, Ed, said and repeat about the hero.
The hero syndrome.
I went back to one plant that I had worked with, and I talked to this operator, and he said, "It just seems things are like it just seems like things are better here." He couldn't have his finger on it. Then the maintenance manager came out of their office and said, "Doc, I'll tell you what my private KPI is." I said, "What is it?" "I get fewer phone calls after midnight."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
or on the
better.
weekends, right?
I'm sleeping better.
I'm sleeping better.
Well, guys, you have seen the tremendous cost of firefighting in the reactive mode. So let's move to what matters, Ed.
So planning, what is planning and what isn't planning? And it seems like sometimes when you go into an organization and say, "Hey, I'm gonna improve the planning," all of a sudden they look at you like, "Is Big Brother gonna be watching me?" It's got some bad connotations. So explain planner and scheduler and why do people react so negatively to them?
Yeah, I do want to take the opportunity to wave my book.
Please.
Yeah, this is McGraw-Hill's best-selling reliability book for the last 20 years.
I saw that. That's in 4 editions. That's impressive.
Well, yeah, 4th edition.
When we were trying to get planning and scheduling working at our power plant in Florida, there wasn't anything written on it. There weren't any books written on it. There weren't any magazine articles. So we just had to struggle for ourselves. But it turns out that the reason planning and scheduling systems fail and people just get rid of them is planner and scheduler are both bad words. They totally steer you down the wrong way. The word planner makes it sound like you're going to tell people how to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have mechanics, electricians, and engineers. They don't want somebody telling them how to do their job.
No.
And how is somebody going to do that? I mean, on the spot, if a mechanic sees this problem here, the plan's not going to cover that. And it turns out that the word planner is a bad word. So a better word is craft historian. What we want to do is use planners to run a Deming cycle, Dr. Deming from the 1950s. Plan, do, check, act, continuous improvement. We have to apply that to maintenance. Plans are not perfect. They're a head start. They're like triage in a hospital.
Yeah.
The patient comes in, they're crippled over, hurting, and the triage person says, "Well, I think this is the problem and this is the doctor you need." And that's what we do. We think the problem's with this device and you'll need one gasket and a short ladder. And then we turn it over to the professional doctor, the professional mechanic. And the mechanic out there says, "Well, really need 2 gaskets and a longer ladder. We also need to fix this." And then we update the job plan to next time we work on that patient, we need 2 gaskets and a longer ladder, and we need to take care of this. And it's just like a hospital. The first thing they do, the doctor looks at your chart. What happened last time? Yeah, you got the same problem. And so a better word would be craft historian. So I would tell
I love that.
Yeah. I would tell planners.
Sounds better, yes.
Go back to the
It does.
and
Impressive.
say, hey, I went to a class. I found out my real job is not to tell you how to do your job. My real job is just to translate from the operator, this pump's making a funny noise to, I think we need to change the impeller. And just save information, the stuff you would, save in your locker next time you work. You're just trying to make a better job plan to give my work away to a contractor. No, we're not. We want to do the work.
Right.
And we need a file.
We are trying to help.
Yeah, that's what the planner does. It's a craft historian.
Sure.
That's pretty cool.
Well, let me just congratulations on the planning handbook. It's really something, and I can see that people is using it in the 4th edition. In there, you talk about the Parkinson law.
Parkinson's law is
yes. Tell us a little bit about it.
Parkinson's law is, Cyril Parkinson wrote an article in the 1950s in an economic magazine. He had studied the British Navy over the years, and as the world dominance by Britain, got smaller and smaller, and their Navy got smaller and smaller, their admin staff got bigger and bigger. So he worked it around to something totally different with the Parkinson's law. The amount of work assigned expands to fill the amount of time available. And Parkinson's law is everywhere.
Yeah.
When you're on a diet, they say use a smaller plate, because whatever size plate you get, you're going to load it up. And so,
and you are going to finish
and
it.
you're going to finish it. Yes.
Right. So if we only assign 8 hours worth of work for a 10-hour shift, it's going to take 10 hours. And
people will expand.
Everybody's
They'll expand.
busy. Everybody's doing something.
I remember at one point in time we had a site shut down, so we had some idle time, and the operators were like, "Hey, let us come in and paint. I hear you got some painters coming in." I go, "Yes," because the last time I had you guys come in and paint, I wound up with paint everywhere. Half of the time was in the break room, and I couldn't find you. So no, I am not letting you paint. You make a mess, and it costs me more money. So
there's
a little bit of that,
there.
give and take.
Well, the problem, the way Parkinson's law affects the scheduling is another contemporary of Dr. Drucker, of Dr. Deming, Dr. Drucker from the 50s.
Yeah.
Management by objective. He says 90% of the time, that's 9 out of 10 times, we don't understand the objective of our activity. And Covey updated that in the 80s to begin with the end in mind. But most people errantly think the purpose of scheduling is to complete the schedule. Now, they don't say that, but they set targets in terms of schedule compliance, not work order completion rate. So if we have, and very common in industry, we set a target of 95% schedule compliance. Mm-hmm. That just makes us underload the schedule so we can have good schedule compliance, which wasn't our purpose anyways. And if you underload the schedule, you'll stay at 35% wrench time because you're not defeating Parkinson's law, and you won't.
And somebody will be beating you over the head for low productivity. And what are you doing? But then
everybody's busy.
Yeah. Oh, look, we're
But we want schedule compliance between 40 and 90%. If you're below 40, you're not trying. If you're over 90, you're lying. You're just not fully loading the schedule. And it's not apparent a lot of times. Maybe your estimates will be inflated. Maybe you've got 10 people on your crew, but you tell the scheduler, well, just give me enough work for 8 people. Or you just say, we're going to load the schedule to 80% to leave room for reactive work. And then you stay at 35% wrench time. But you look good because you had 95% schedule compliance.
Schedule compliance. And you were great straight man, because that was the question I was going to ask next. Is like, what's a sweet spot, what's fake? But it really makes me think of, PM completion rates, which we discussed, in a few episodes. And, we used to go in and say, hey, 95% PM completion rate. If you're not at that, bad dog. You are not doing a good job, right?
Well, wait. We do want high PM completion rate. But the way that, you don't cut down your PMs. You fully load the whole schedule.
Yeah, no. I'm using the example of PM completion rate because, frankly, if you have 95 PM completion rate and your run is running at 50 or 55, like I see out there, something isn't right. And you start driving some inappropriate behavior where people start pencil whipping PMs. Because when the big guy comes in, he wants to see 95, and it's not at 95, it's going to be a problem. So all of this is kind of related, with having unrealistic expectations to some degree. But you've given us some good targets to think about from a schedule completion standpoint.
Yeah, between 40 and 90, as you said. But Doc, what's wrong with using plan versus actual?
That's the most common planner metric or KPI that we grade people with, because it seems obvious. Well, how do we grade the planners? Well, was the plan complete or not? Well, okay, we'll measure the accuracy of their estimates. But there are good KPIs. There are waste of time KPIs. there are actually some counterproductive KPIs, and this is one of them.
Sure.
If you're grading the planner on the accuracy of their estimates, they'll generally give people, they'll be forced to over time give, or let's just say they can get a better score if they give people too much time. So let's say they give people 10 hours for what a job should take 8 hours, and the craft takes 8 hours. Okay, because of Parkinson's law, because we haven't assigned enough work, because we had all these 10-hour jobs, and all the jobs take 10 hours when they're really 8-hour jobs, and the planner gets a great score. Now, if we grade the crafts person, so if you're grading the planner on plan versus actual, you'll probably stay at 35% range time because you overloaded all the estimates and you're not really loading 100%. Okay, so if you're
what you use,
if you grade the
so if that is that,
if you're grading the crafts person, okay, and you say you give them, let's just say you give them 8 hours for a job, okay, and this particular crafts person, that's going to take me 10 hours to do that job right. But if they want it done in 8 hours, I'll do it in 8 hours because I'll get a better score. But they'll do that by taking shortcuts or compromising quality. So if you're grading planners, you're compromising your productivity. And if you're grading your craftsperson, you compromise your quality.
Right. Yeah. To push and shove. So can you walk us through one of your real world turnaround?
But just 1 second, Ed. Just to not leave this point, you shouldn't grade them with that metric.
Not that one.
What do you suggest?
Yes. There are two metrics. If I had to grade planners or work with the planners, hey, you need to work on this area. One is every time they plan a job, they have to use the living plan module of the computer. In SAP, it's a task list. In Maximo, it's a job plan module. And in Avantis, I think it's a standard work order. Every one of the CMMSs has a job plan module. Most companies just use that for PM because they repeat. We want every single time we plan a job to do it in the living plan module so we can save all that feedback and run the Deming cycle. So I don't care if the planner gave you a 100-step job plan. If they did not use the job plan module, they don't get credit for a planned job. If they give me a 3-step job plan, but they use the plan module, they get credit for a planned job. Doc, don't you care about quality? Well, the quality is when you pick the planners. We just want to make sure they're running a Deming cycle, which is evidenced by their using the job plan module. The other KPI is a metric of planner maturity. Are they staying ahead of the unplanned backlog? That they have to, in their hearts, believe they can't be perfect. And so the industry question is, how detailed should a job plan be? As detailed as possible, subject to the constraint. You've got to plan all the work. If you're planning 3 jobs perfectly, like wonderfully, superly, but you're not getting to other 7 jobs, we're going to work 7 unplanned jobs. And it's because you're not feeding the scheduling monster when we run out of work orders. We're going to start doing unplanned work, which is not even good as a starter job. So we want every job to have a plan, and they use the job plan module. So those are the 2 metrics.
And Doc, would you suggest linking that also to other kind of metrics like uptime, for instance? And then you motivate them not only to do their job, but to see the end result of the job.
I like stock sharing. It's a profit sharing. But the problem is, you want your kids to get good grades. Okay?
That's a good point.
Right?
Yes, sir.
But if you reward them for good grades and punish them for bad grades, they'll just cheat. And then they'll be dumb as a dog on the porch and they won't get a job and they'll live in your basement, even though they got good grades. So that's schedule compliance. It's a why type metric. What you want to do, if you want your kids to get good grades and not live in your basement, you've got to make them go to bed on time and you got to make them do homework every night. which has nothing to do with grades. But
You're taking care of the basics, right?
So
You build that foundation, and they will rise up.
we
deliver the outcome you want.
What we want to do is press the planners to get all the work planned. It's okay if it's not perfect. Use the job plan module. We want to fully load the schedule, and it's okay to break the schedule. Then we'll do more proactive work. We'll do better quality work because we're using better and better job plans, and we'll make more money. But if you set targets on making money, then everybody cheats.
You got to show them the bottom line.
Yeah.
So, can you give us a couple of specific examples of real world turnarounds? And it was just fascinating to find the number of places around the world where you've done this.
Yeah, a couple. I'll give you 4 quick ones. In Dallas, the water system, they fully loaded the schedules, and schedule compliance was 25%. Well, under 40 you're not trying, over 90 you're lying. So the maintenance director went out there to the maintenance area and said, "Hey, what are you fellas doing with the schedule I give you?" "Oh, that list? We put it over here on top of the filing cabinet." "No, guys, look, read my lips. I want you to use that schedule a little bit more." And so then schedule compliance went to 50%, which that doesn't sound like a lot.
That's big.
But for
it doubled.
Yeah, but for their 50-person workforce, they went from 7 work orders per person per week to 10, which is a 40% bump. So their 50-person workforce, they got 20 people for free to do the proactive work worth 10 times its value. Yeah, they got the equivalent monetary value as if 200 people's salaries profit.
Yeah.
And then a company in Hawaii, they were at 95% schedule compliance, but they had a lot of reactive work. Well, that's mutually exclusive. Just looking at their time estimates, all their time estimates were bloated. If a job was going to take longer than an hour, they just gave the person 4 hours. They worked an 8-hour shift. And if a job was going to take longer than half a day, they just gave the person 8 hours.
Full day.
Yeah, and so they thought they were fully loading the schedules, but they really weren't because their estimates were bloated. And they were at 35% range time. And, they're not a bad company. It's just they're leaving a lot of money on the table. Then an LNG company in Brunei, we went from completing, 130 work orders a week to over, 200 work orders a week.
Jeez.
So we got a 70 work orders a week, 300 work orders a month of free proactive maintenance to keep things from breaking so you can make more money. And in 3 months, we ran out of work orders. I mean, it's really common because we just don't have the muscles to generate that work. But then you can devote your people to doing more predictive maintenance, doing more things with sensors that you just can't get around to.
Now, when you're fighting fire all the time,
doing projects on your own, operators telling you about little stuff,
and then you see the magic, because when they start being creative, and with all they know, they start coming with great improvements, and
it's exciting.
It is exciting for everyone.
And then the last example, in South America, a mining company had 2,000 mechanics. And I mean, how do you get trained people in a lot of these places? We got a 30% pump. So we got 600 mechanics for free, fully skilled, just as trained as everybody else. So how do you do that? Well, it's the planning and scheduling. Plans are not perfect. Fully load schedules. It's okay to break the schedule. It's okay if the plan's not perfect.
No, it leads to some amazing improvements. So shifting gears to segment 3. So we've talked about the cost and what can we do to improve planning, but now how to sell it, right? And what are the things that are getting in the way? Because so far, everything that you've said makes a ton of sense. Like, we should be seeing this not as the exception, but as the rule. But we know that's not really the case. So The industry has some benchmarks around schedule compliance too that, we've talked about that a little bit. You don't agree with. And you said that conventional wisdom of 95% is not right. It's wrong. So a little bit more on that one.
I think 95% schedule compliant might be world class, but in 1993, there are only 3 companies in the world that were
Wow.
world class. And so, I mean, like a world class storeroom probably doesn't carry very many bearings because you're so good at lubrication. Okay, so you tell your storeroom, I want you to get rid of your bearings because we're going to be world class. It just doesn't work. I think
That's like the car trying to pull the horse, right?
Yeah, I think you could get to 95% schedule compliance, but if you're above 40, your supervisor's not ignoring the schedule, and below 90, I know your supervisor's not cheating. Your scheduler is fully loading the schedule. There's still room in there for money, which is, are you bad at lubrication? That's why things break. Are your supervisors clogged up in the office where they can't make field decisions? Are your spare parts not where they should be? Do you have a problem with your storeroom? Do your operators break things because they're not trained? Are the maintenance people not trained? They're not fixing things well. Those are the areas to focus at to get up into the 90% schedule compliance where things are truly, you can't be world-class planning and scheduling without everything else world-class. So I see where the benchmark of 95% comes from. But I think for the 99% of plants in the world, we want to shoot between 40 and 90% for schedule compliance to make sure we're getting the pop and work order completion rate. And then we need to work on the other stuff. Planning schedule is not the silver bullet.
No. And in the examples, the 4 examples that you put it, just by working in those, in every case, you bump 30 or 40% up with those results. So it's massive.
To sell it, the plant manager's got to get it. And if they're being held by corporate, did you produce so many cartons of product last month? Well, that's really short term if you're not careful. It should be, did you properly lubricate everything? And let the number of products dictate where you ought to look. But
and really look for the long term. But you mentioned leadership. What's a good ROI that you can use to sell it to them?
I think that it's the maintenance manager's question. How can we, well, first of all, they have to understand what maintenance is. If they think maintenance is fixing things really quick,
that's a problem.
Just lost anyways. So
you're not in the right room.
Once you understand that maintenance is keeping things from breaking to begin with, then the proper maintenance manager question is, how can we do more proactive maintenance to keep things from breaking when we have our hands full of reactive maintenance?
Right.
And then you can deal with the fully loaded schedule. Well, then the purpose of scheduling is to help us complete more work than we would normally complete. Did you see the movie The Princess Bride? That one word that guy keeps saying the whole movie. That's inconceivable. That's inconceivable. At the very end of the movie, his friend pulls him aside and says, I don't think you know what that word means. We don't know what the word schedule means. We think it means to make a calendar, or we think it means to complete the schedule. We've got to educate ourselves past that. The purpose of scheduling is to help us complete more work than we would normally complete. And our enemy is Parkinson's law. We have to fully load schedules, and then it's okay to break the schedule. We have adult supervisors. And the purpose of planning is not to tell our senior journeyman certified craftspersons how to do their job. It's to run a Deming cycle. So if you can drop the purpose of scheduling, Dr. Deming name a lot, we really want to run planning as a continuous improvement cycle and use the planners to give head starts, because mechanics will kill a planning program. You messed up the plan here, you messed up the plan there, you're a terrible planner. Nobody wants to be a planner because there's not a leader that understands that concept that, hey, the planners aren't telling you how to do their job.
Yeah, it has to be a team effort. In some places, my most effective planners were folks that were mechanics and were highly respected, and then moved into a planning role as a promotion or career expansion. But in some places where we brought planners in from the outside, that took a little bit of massaging. They had to have the right personality. So there's a pattern where leaders cut, and we talked this a few times. I'll say unethical leaders cut maintenance, right? To make their numbers look good for 18 months, and they hope they skate out the door before the bills come due and your equipment starts falling around your ear. So it's evident.
You could say it's unethical. I don't. Some of them I really don't know if they're doing it intentionally. It's just maybe they don't. Why do you have to lubricate things every month? Why can't you do it once a year? Why do you have to? I mean,
respectfully, if you're a plant manager and you don't understand why your bearings need to be lubed once a year, I will tell you what, you're not working for me. I'll just put that out there, right? By unethical, I mean people that are only looking at how they can make a short-term splash to make their careers look good and get promoted to the next job before they hand somebody a pile sandwich of $3 million of deferred maintenance. I've seen this happen way too often to think that it's a rare event, respectfully.
Well, if you've not replaced your maintenance staff over the years, I will tell you, the planning and scheduling is like, it's hard to believe. You get 50% pop. If you had
it's huge
20 mechanics, you could suddenly have 30 mechanics. How do you?
One last for you, Doc. If you had to give them, our audience, 3 takeaways on the discussion, what would it be? What would those be?
Plans aren't perfect. Schedules aren't perfect. You're at 35% right now.
Great. Well, a lot of wisdom there, guys. So listen to that, and we just want to thank Doc. Doc, one last one. Can you show your handbook again?
Oh, I would like to.
Just people know.
McGraw-Hill would be very happy with that too.
There you go.
This was the first book that came out that you
guys
could find.
Look at that.
And,
hey, well
go
worth
and check it out.
Diving into
a lot of value.
And my website too, Palmer Planning.
Website as well. Don't let the 800 pages scare you.
Yeah, if you need a door prop, if you need a door.
It's like a working manual.
Great.
Thank you so much. It's phenomenal.
No, thank you very much, Doc.
Yeah, really
great having you in the show.
Getting all your perspective, and your reference to some things that people may not remember anymore, but are so applicable today. Deming, right? The PDCA cycle.
Tucker.
The
handbook.
In Search of Excellence, right? Yes. There were so many great books that came out in the 80s, and a lot of that is very much applicable today. So fantastic. Thank you so much, Doc.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, friends, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you very much for joining us on the Manufacturing Meetup. So if you enjoy it, please follow or subscribe. And if you are watching us on YouTube, please leave us a comment or review in iTunes. And please share this podcast with your friends so we can grow the meetup.
If you want to keep the conversation going, email us at mmu@augury.com. You know the deal. We'll also have links to Doc's work in the show notes for this episode, and see you next time.
See you
Bye
guys.
from MMU.